On today's episode, how to not die at World's Toughest Mudder with Molly Kenneth and Jason Nicholson. This is the World's Toughest Podcast. Welcome to the World's Toughest Podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's World's Toughest Mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the World's Toughest Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the World's Toughest Podcast. You can email me at willhicks@gmail.com or leave us a review on iTunes. I appreciate the reviews. Thank you very much. I am not a doctor. Before you go to World's Toughest Mudder, you need to sign a waiver certifying that you have talked to your doctor about World's Toughest, told him what it is, and gotten him on board with the idea that you are healthy enough to run World's Toughest Mudder. We're going to talk about some serious stuff in our interview today. World's Toughest Mudder is the most fun 24 hours you'll ever have, but it can be dangerous. Seriously, talk to a doctor. I am not a doctor, and I am not giving you medical advice. Nothing I say should be construed as medical advice. Except for go talk to a doctor. That's medical advice. World's Toughest Mudder is literally around the corner. Don't stop training, but what you've got right now is what you've got. The most important thing right now is to not get injured. Don't do anything stupid between now and November 11th. Before we get to the news, I want you to circle a date on your calendar. November 6th, 9 p.m. Pacific time. That is the Monday before World's Toughest Mudder. November 6th, 9 p.m. Pacific. We're going to do a live call-in show for the podcast. We'll have details on our Facebook page as it gets closer, and on my Twitter at @TheWillHicks. But for now, save the date. November 6th at 9 p.m. Pacific. Here's what we're talking about this episode. First, another new toughest venue announced for 2018. Second, no more WTM 2018 theories. We're done. Third, tougher Mudder regional results from last weekend. Fourth, there's a new episode of Road to World's Toughest Mudder released with Stephanie Bishop. Fifth, Tough Mudder has announced a new program called Repeat Offender. It's like Diet Legionnaire. Sixth, new iTunes reviews. Thanks, guys. Seventh, we're going to give away 4 pair of Merrell Agility Peak Flex trail running shoes. That's like $500 worth of shoes. And then we're going to talk with Molly Kenneth and Jason Nicholson about how to not die at World's Toughest Mudder. First news item, new toughest venue announced for 2018. I have painful news for the bank accounts of Melissa Dugan, Jim Campbell, Mark James, and Sarah Knight. This week, Tough Mudder released another new venue for 2018, Toughest Mudder Germany. It'll be held outside of Berlin on September 1st. Thanks to Ian K. for the heads up. Ian has become my unofficial Tough Mudder Europe news source. Thank you, Ian. I swear Team HQ is listening to our podcast. Just last week, I had a whole theory about World's Toughest 2018 possibly being held in the summer because all 6 of the toughest mudders would have been held by the end of June. This throws out that theory. Actually, here's the final theory, and it's not a theory. No more theories. This is a statement of fact. A guy sent me something this week. I checked it out myself, and it is real. World's Toughest Mudder 2018 will be held outside of Atlanta, Georgia, at Bouchard Farms. Boucher Farms. Somebody let me know how to pronounce that. willhicks@gmail.com. This is the same venue Toughest Mudder South was held at in 2017. Here's the crazy part. As it stands now, World's Toughest may be held the same weekend as the regular Tough Mudder, October 20th through 21st. There was a survey from Team HQ last year that floated the idea of turning WTM into a celebration of all things Tough Mudder, combining a regular event with World's Toughest, possibly having both events, well, really all 3 events, World's Toughest, Tough Mudder Full, and a Tough Mudder Half, at the same venue on the same weekend. According to what I saw, It looks like that may be the plan for 2018. Of course, that's subject to change. What do you think about World's Toughest Mudder Atlanta? And what do you think about possibly sharing the course with a Tough Mudder and a Tough Mudder half at the same time as everyone else is doing World's Toughest Mudder? Let me know, willhicks@gmail.com. Thank you to my anonymous correspondent for the heads up on Atlanta. Next news item, Tougher Mudder regional results. The second of 3 regional Tougher Mudder races was held this past weekend. The top 10 male and female finishers at Tougher Mudder Carolinas qualified to compete in the Tougher Mudder Championship race held at Tougher Mudder SoCal on November 4th. The top 10 male finishers from Tougher Mudder Carolinas are Ryan Woods, Robert Killian, Brian Gwiski, Ryan Kempson, Edward Zubrowski, Matthew Kempson, Joe Peeler, Michael Mayer, Jason Harley, Kevin Bubbles the Clown Gregory. Some of those names you may recognize from Toughest Mudder results and or interviews on the podcast this past year. Ryan Woods got second at Toughest Mudder Atlanta. He finished first at Tougher Mudder Carolinas. Robert Killian, who finished second at Tougher Mudder Carolinas, got second at Toughest Mudder Canada behind Ryan Atkins. Kevin Bubbles the Clown Gregory was on an episode of the podcast talking about Toughest Mudder Philadelphia. The funniest thing to me is on the official results page, Kevin's name is listed as Kevin, quotation marks, Bubbles the Clown, quotation marks, Gregory. Melissa Dugan has Sharkbait in her official results, but it looks like she put it as her middle name. Somehow Kevin got Team HQ to officially recognize his nickname. Kevin, you might want to do a name change. Darth Vader committed to his name. You should get Bubbles on your driver's license. On the women's side, the top 10 finishers at Tougher Mudder Carolinas were Lindsay Webster, Lauren Toxa, Jennifer Bleeker, Krista Dustman, Casey Northup, Sydney Blong, Kelly Kaywood Trotto, Billy Sayers, Carrie Schneider, and Nikki Perry. You probably recognize the name of the winner, Lindsay Webster. We talked about her a bit last week. Lindsay has had a dominating 2017 in both the Tough Mudder circuit and the Spartan Race circuit. Last year, Obstacle Racing Media did an article calculating the prize winnings of the top men and top women in OCR. It'll be interesting this year if they do that article again to see how Lindsay did compared to her husband, Ryan Atkins. Another name you might recognize is the 5th place finisher, Casey Northup. She ran Toughest Mudder 4 times this year and qualified as an elite contender 3 times. Casey finished 4th in Atlanta, 4th in Canada, and 5th in Chicago at the Toughest Mudder races. I asked her about her results on an earlier episode of the podcast.
I like to get really close to the podium, but not quite make it there.
This weekend is the 3rd and final regional qualifier for the Tougher Mudder Championship race. It'll be at Tougher Mudder Las Vegas. I talked with Allison Ty, and she will be at Tougher Las Vegas. Expect her to have a strong performance this weekend. The next week is the championship race at Tougher Mudder SoCal, and the week after that is World's Toughest Mudder. You can watch the Tougher Mudder races live at facebook.com/toughmudderlive. I will be in Vegas in that Tougher Mudder wave, but don't watch hoping to see me because I'll be way in the back. Next news item, Road to World's Toughest Mudder. The new episode of Road to World's Toughest Mudder is online at amazon.com/toughmudder. If you can't remember amazon.com/toughmudder, there's a link on our Facebook page, facebook.com/world's toughest pod. This is episode 3 of 4. This one featuring Stephanie Bishop.
I am the 2016 World's Toughest Mudder female champion, and I ran 85 miles.
We haven't talked about these Road to World's Toughest shows or episodes much, but they are great. If you want insight into how a winner of World's Toughest Mudder trains, check out the episode with Stephanie Bishop.
Ideally, it's probably going to be a mountain run. I would say anywhere from like maybe a short run, an hour, up to, 3, 5, maybe even 8 hours if it's a long training day. I come back, I shower, I eat, or maybe I nap right away because if I'm tired, I need to sleep. Then I wake up, I eat some more, and usually I'll go out for a second training session. It might just be like taking my bike out for an hour, really easy, or it could be heading out to the gym.
Near the end of the episode, Stephanie talks about the field of women at this year's upcoming race and how strong they've all been at the 8-hour Toughest Mudder races.
Lindsay Webster, who ran consistently 40 miles, 45 miles. Same with Allison Ty, who won the whole series. And Amelia Boone is back. She was injured all year long last year. So it's going to be kind of a bloodbath out there.
Thanks to Amazon.com for the audio. You can watch the full episode at Amazon.com/ToughMudder. Next news item. Tough Mudder announced a new incentive program to encourage people to run multiple races. It's called the Repeat Offender. If that sounds vaguely familiar to you, then good. It means you probably read It Takes a Tribe by Tough Mudder CEO Will Dean.
In 2014, we were developing the idea that gave special privileges to our returning mudders. One was an exclusive obstacle that would allow them to bypass the electroshock therapy if they chose to. I wanted to signify this by calling the returning mudders repeat offenders.
It Takes a Tribe is available at fine booksellers everywhere and Books A Million. Thanks to Penguin for the excerpt. So, repeat offender. If you complete the requirements, you will get a special t-shirt and a, quote, kettlebell collectible. It's not an actual kettlebell. Don't plan on getting a new kettlebell. So how do you get the new swag? It depends on what country you're in. They've announced it for the US and the UK, but I couldn't find it for any other countries. And the requirements for the US and UK are totally different. In the UK, it's real straightforward. Run 2 or 3 of the Tough Mudder 5K, Tough Mudder Full, and Tough Mudder Half in a calendar year starting next year. The 3 events, the 5K, the Half, and the Full Tough Mudder, are what Tough Mudder is calling the Challenge Series, as opposed to the competitive series, which is Tougher Mudder, Toughest Mudder, and World's Toughest Mudder. So in England, if you do 2 of the 3 Challenge Series races in 1 year, you are a repeat offender. It's like a trifecta, but not really. In the US, they made it complicated. I'm serious. There's actually a flowchart to see if you qualify. Here's how to be a repeat offender in the US. Nothing about the 5K. Run a Tough Mudder Full and a Tough Mudder Half within 2 seasons starting in 2017. So if you ran a half anytime during 2017 and you run a full anytime during 2018, congratulations, you qualify. It's way easier to earn the repeat offender in the US, but it seems like the UK has the better model. Once the 5K rolls out wide in the US, I'd imagine they'll change the US requirements to look more like the UK's. And you know they don't mind changing the rules on us. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts the only reason you have to do 2 out of the 3 in the UK is because requiring a runner to do 3 different events of 3 different lengths to qualify for an arbitrary award and an opportunity to self-brand as a member of a certain tribe has already been done before. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not the target audience for the repeat offender. Although some of you are, I've seen your t-shirt collections. If they said, become a repeat offender and you get a special headband, then you'd care. No, not a headband. If they said, become a repeat offender and get a special repeat offender bib, then every single one of you would be in line to run a Tough Mudder Half. Right behind me. 2 more things before we talk with our guests. We're going to read some iTunes reviews and then give away some shoes. iTunes. From Anon123. 5 stars. My absolute favorite podcast for all things related to Tough Mudder. The interviews with all ranges of athletes from first-timers to pro is very insightful. These interviews have aided me in preparing better for the toughest events I participated in. My WTM pit crew will be listening to a few of these in order to mentally prepare them for the grueling task ahead. Keep up the great content, you majestic, beautiful, Tough Mudder effer. P.S. I listen to these on my 3 to 4 hour long runs. The hour-long episode was great. Thank you, Anon. I'm not sure which hour-long episode you're referring to. They're all an hour long these days. The last episode I had that was less than an hour long was the episode on pit crewing from August 1st. Next review from WTM newbie Big Red, 5 stars, taking the time to prepare. Gearing up for taking the challenge on at the new location next year, 2018. We'll be signing up for at least one toughest, if not two, for next year in the next week. Want to push the limits and find out what I'm made of. Thanks for the great content and information about each race, racers, and general good-to-know knowledge of going the full distance. Keep up the great work. See you at the races next year, and best of luck at WTM 2017. Sean Myers. Thank you, Sean. I look forward to seeing you at World's Toughest 2018 in Atlanta. You should sign up early for 2 reasons. 1, it'll be cheaper, and 2, you'll be committed. No backing out. You can leave a review for the podcast like Sean Myers and Anon123 did. Open the podcast app on your iPhone and search for Tough Mudder. We're the first one that pops up. Click the podcast logo and scroll down until you can leave a review. I sincerely appreciate it. Let's give some shoes away. Merrell is partnering with World's Toughest Podcast to give members of the WTM community pairs of the Merrell Agility Peak Flex trail running shoes. I bought a pair of these months ago when we started the giveaway, and I love them. I've already bought a second pair for WTM as a backup, just in case. I know this sounds like an ad, but it's not. Merrell has paid me $0. I've gotten 0 shoes from Merrell. I just really like the shoes. They're not the only good pair of OCR shoes out there, but they're the best ones I've found for me. I'll tell you what else I like. I like Mudgear socks, Black Diamond headlamps, Blegmate gloves. I like Cup of Noodles, hot chocolate, Uncrustables, Mountain Dew, throwback Mountain Dew for nutrition. If I didn't like the shoes, I would not talk about the shoes. We haven't done this in a while. Let's give away 4 pair of Merrell Agility Peak Flex shoes. The first pair goes to Bobby Long. The second pair goes to Ronan Kirby. The third pair goes to Zachary Redden. And the final pair goes to Sherry Donison. Congratulations, Bobby, Ronan, Zachary, and Sherry. Look for an email from me with directions on how to claim your prize. Hey, do me a favor. When you get the shoes, take a picture of your brand new shoes and tag me and Merrell. Thanks again to Merrell for the shoes and Sue Harvey Brown from the Sports and Event Marketing Department at Merrell. I appreciate you. My guests today are Molly Kenneth and Jason Nicholson. Molly and Jason have written a paper about Jason's experience at World's Toughest Mudder last year when he ended up in the hospital 2 days after the race, and how to prevent that from happening to you. You can read the article at mudrunguide.com, or there is a link at our Facebook page, facebook.com/World's Toughest Pod. Before we talk to Molly and Jason, no one on this podcast is a doctor. You need to talk to a doctor to get medical advice. Do you understand? It is on you to talk to your doctor. It's time to talk to Molly and Jason. Let's go to the phones. Our guests today are Jason Nicholson and Molly Kenneth. Jason ran World's Toughest Mudder in 2016, finishing with 65 miles, and will be back in Vegas this year for Worlds 2017. On November 12th, Jason was in the desert with all of us. On November 14th, he was in the hospital in the ICU with kidney failure, liver failure, and his blood overloaded with toxins. Molly is a nurse practitioner who works with the Tough Mudder medical team and has volunteered at World's Toughest Mudder 2016, as well as multiple Toughest Mudders this year. She's written a paper with Jason on his experiences last year and how endurance athletes or aspiring endurance athletes can avoid making the same mistakes Jason made in 2016. And she will be competing at World's Toughest in 2017. Molly and Jason, welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Guys, we'll start with Jason's story about WTM in 2016, and then we'll go to Molly and talk about what we can do to avoid having a story similar to Jason's. Also, Molly, I'd like to talk to you about WTM medical in general and the relationship the medical team has with the runners at World's Toughest. Molly, as Jason and I are talking, feel free to jump in. Actually, before we start, Molly, what is a nurse practitioner?
A nurse practitioner is a master's level
nurse that has the capacity to diagnose and prescribe.
So you can you can write prescriptions.
I write prescriptions all day, every day. I do a combination of urgent care and primary care, so I get just a little bit of time to do the history, physical, diagnosis, prescriptions, and discharge.
Jason, you've actually run World's Toughest 3 times. Tell me about your first World's Toughest Mudder.
So first World's Toughest Mudder was 2012. Long story short there, became a runner that year because of World's Toughest Mudder. Was a bit, I've done fitness most of my life, but I hadn't been a runner, and I wanted to give World's Toughest Mudder a try. So I came with my friend Jesse Howes to 2012 WTM in New Jersey. It was pretty cold that year. I put up 40 miles in, I think, 14 hours, and I dropped out after I walked into the warm med tent. And that was the end. That was the end for me that year. In hindsight, that was a pretty good performance, considering in that year I had made a change to being a runner and trying to figure out how to train for this crazy thing. For about 2 years afterwards, it bugged me that I dropped out, I would say. But with the knowledge I have today, I'm not too concerned about it, nor am I hurt about the fact that I dropped out. It was a good decision, and I was happy with what I accomplished that year, and with all that was going on at that race. Really cold. Had feet that were I would say ice bricks. A lot of the stuff I think people struggle with, being too cold, is what I think took me down that year. Anyway, that's a quick rundown of 2012.
Tell me about your second time at World's Toughest.
The second time I didn't really come out to run for max miles. I came out because of my friend Jesse Howes and his wife. His wife actually wanted to get 50 miles. And I told Jesse earlier in that year if he wanted me to come out, I would come out and help pace and, assist them in getting her to her goal. And he took about a month to get back to me, and he said, "Hey, if you're willing to come out and buy the ticket, by all means do that." And so I did. 2015 was quite an experience because so I met Morgan Mackay at that race, and not in her we'll say not in the best frame of mind. She was in the pits freezing, and I came into the pits ahead of Jesse and his wife Caitlin, so that I could go to the bathroom and keep up with them. And Morgan was freezing in the pits. Ended up taking her back out with us on the course, and we got her warm again. But Morgan was physically exhausted and on the edge of being able to function. And so I just ended up staying with her, even though she told me to go on. Like, the body language said, "I'm in trouble," but her voice said, "Go on." So I stayed with her for that lap and got her back to her friends. She ended up going to sleep and going back out later for one more lap under supervision of her friends. But anyway, I ended up making a good friend there. I put up 40 miles in 2015 quite easily. 3 weeks later, I ran my first 100 miler, and that was, kind of World's Toughest Mudder was a bit of I would call it a training race, kind of just part of the ethos of ultra running, where you pace and you help out others, kind of on your way towards your own goals.
And then 2016, you actually did pretty well mileage-wise, but that's actually the reason we're talking. Tell me about what happened in 2016.
Yeah, 2016, I came in well trained. I had put in over 500 hours in training coming up to 2016, and I was ready to go for broke. Max effort, determined not to quit. So starting out the race, I was running with Morgan Mackay, and we had planned to run as much as we could together, and we ran for the first 2.5 laps or so, and I started to notice that I was getting spasms in my calves, and coming into the third lap, and so I switched over to drinking straight water instead of Tailwinds. And when we got to the Everest obstacle on the third lap, I decided not to go up Everest, but to instead take the penalty because I was pretty sure my legs were going to lock up if I took off quick. And, they locked up as soon as I hit the water at Everest, and I swam across the penalty with my calves cramped up. That was the beginning of, some serious muscle breakdown. Severe cramps will make you sore just by themselves. Anyway, normally, if this had been any normal race, like a short race, say even just a marathon, I would have dropped out. The cramps were so severe. But I had already determined, coming to this race, I wasn't quitting. And so I just kind of dealt with it, let the cramps go away, slowly started to run again once I could. But then when I got to Blockness, and the cold again initiated more cramps in my quads. And I stood there at Blockness with my quads locked out for about 5 minutes. And again, more serious muscle breakdown, which is going to come back into play later in this story. But anyway, that initiated, cramps for the rest of the race all over my body that weren't so severe, but I had just about every muscle group in my body cramp up at some point. My chest, biceps, forearms, abs, lats, traps. It was pretty strange. I had such a weird time with the cramps the whole rest of the race. That part was pretty terrible, and that put me in a lot of pain. So I started taking ibuprofen. We'll come back to that, I'm sure, a little bit later, but I'll just say I started taking ibuprofen. I had ibuprofen on me all the time. I had my crew refilling, my pack every time I came into the pits, and they were refilling the ibuprofen as well, which wasn't a good thing.
Jason, let me jump in. Let me ask you, what time during the race did you start taking ibuprofen?
Oh, a little bit before hour 3.
Okay, go ahead.
But that wasn't the first issue. Let me just tell him that it was actually the hydration plan that he had, which was the beginning of all this, not just the Advil.
There's going to end up being 3 major components here. One is the severe muscle breakdown, which is going to lead to rhabdomyolysis. The second issue is drinking too much water, which probably helped initiate the cramps in the first place. I don't know for sure, but I started off drinking too much water, taking in too much at the beginning of the race. And the third thing on top of those two is ibuprofen. So those 3 things combined together put me into a pretty dangerous place. Anyway, we'll come back to those.
So you're 3 hours in, you're probably a little overhydrated, cramping up a lot, and you're taking ibuprofen to treat the pain as you're running. What happened next?
Just started to, just settle into a fairly it's a constant pace, and the pain continued to grow, and I continued to take ibuprofen to try to deal with the pain because I was in a lot of pain. And so for the next, 12 hours, I took about 15 ibuprofen, which is, for that amount of time, is too much.
A normal day on a normal person, that actually would be fine. It's that you were already overhydrated and you were already pushed too far is why ibuprofen in endurance events is not safe.
once I'd realized, the ibuprofen wasn't helping and how much I'd taken, I quit taking it. But damage was done with that respect. At my second to last lap, so mile 55 to 60, I felt terrible. I was really considering quitting after that lap, but I got back to my pit, and my pit crew, which was my sister and my brother, did what I asked them to do, and that was to not let me quit. And I went back out for another lap, and I finished out the race with 65 miles. Was glad to be done. Was hurting, pretty bad, but I deal with pain pretty well, and so seemed to be okay there. I knew, I just needed to recover, is what I thought. So I thought, but after the race, I think that evening, the first time I tried to go to the bathroom, there was a brown tinge to, my urine, which that's an indication of blood in your urine. That's not a good thing. Going into the next day, wasn't able really to go to the bathroom anymore. Wasn't able to defecate, wasn't able to urinate. And I went to the brunch the next morning, and I was so sore that when we did standing ovations, I did not get up. And the two people sitting on either side of me, Morgan was on one side and Ann was on the other, they kept looking at me and going, are you okay? You don't have to stay here. You can go back to the hotel. So anyway, I got through the brunch. Things continued to get worse, and I knew I needed to go to the hospital, Monday afternoon. But my sister just has some aversion to doctors from some past experiences. And so, she said to me when I told her I think I need to go to the hospital, she said, well, let's try a few things first. And so I didn't go to the hospital Monday afternoon. My patience was pretty high, and I was okay with that. And so, we tried some things. I tried eating some things. I threw up, couldn't defecate, couldn't urinate. Got all the way to Tuesday morning. I finally said, I need to go to the hospital. So I ended up in the ER. They took my blood, and as soon as they got the numbers back from the blood tests, they put me into the ICU. I ended up with hyponatremia, exercise-associated hyponatremia.
What is hyponatremia?
Hyponatremia is where you've basically taken in too much water and you've diluted the sodium in your blood. And, there's a sodium-potassium balance. Molly, why don't you explain this since you're, the medical expert?
So exercise-associated hyponatremia is low serum sodium, secondary to, like you said, taking in too much fluid. That's the biggest risk factor is overhydration. So in Jason's case, he had a set kilocalorie plan that he was going to take in through his sports drinks. He added another liter of fluid on top of that, and that's what he was going to drink during it. The goal is to get athletes to drink to thirst. Your body will actually tell you when it wants fluid. What a normal body will do when it's overloaded with fluid is it'll pee more. Sometimes the body has the reverse response, which is it holds on to more fluid, and that's what Jason's body did. So normal serum sodium is between 135 and 145. When you get down about sub 125, 120, doctors expect unconsciousness, major issues. When his first lab, he was at 117. How this guy was conscious, I have no idea.
Right. So in Tim Noakes' book, Waterlogged, in one of his introductory chapters, he goes through what happened to a woman who ran the Boston Marathon. Anyway, she died at sodium of 112. She went unconscious at 125. I was at 117. I was not unconscious, and 117 is not that much different than 112. And so again, she died at 112. This is serious. The hyponatremia part is the most serious part of this, because that will that can cause brain hemorrhaging, and you can die. It's very serious. The swelling that people are getting at WTM, that's say in both hands or both feet, that is hyponatremia. That's probably not as severe because they didn't end up in the hospital. But I know of at least one guy that I've talked to who has had most of the same symptoms that I did, but he never went to the hospital. And as Molly and I have talked, probably the only thing that kept him from, passing away was the fact that he was young and fit. His kidneys were probably able to recover.
We don't tend to think of overhydration as a concern for some. If anything, we worry about getting dehydrated at World's Toughest. Why is overhydration so dangerous?
So there's been a shift in the logic. There was a long time where it was like drink. More people die of being overhydrated. It's because there's been more research and unfortunately more deaths. When a runner comes in and collapses, we want to think it's dehydration, but it's really it's the discerning eye, and that's why I really promote Tough Mudders medical group. Their contractor is Med Prep Group, because they're prepared for all these contingencies. They have the ability to check your serum sodium right there. So you really will hurt yourself if you plan on drinking X amount of fluid. As Jason's saying, the first sign is those swollen hands and feet. If you can address it then, drink yourself some bouillon and eat your chips, you're probably going to be just fine. Later signs include nausea, vomiting, mental status changes, and ultimately some difficulty breathing, some swelling in your brain, and coma, seizure, and death.
Now, just to be clear, I've never heard of anyone dying from World's Toughest Mudder. And Jason, you're the first guy I've heard of actually that had to go to the hospital. What happened after you were in the hospital? They diagnosed you. What was your treatment like?
Well, before we get into that, just let me finish with we stopped at like what was happening as I was going in ER. So we covered hyponatremia. There was two other things that were going on. There was rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdo is where you've got so much muscle breakdown that it clogs your kidneys. And so that probably helped with the hyponatremia because my kidneys weren't functioning right. Rhabdo is, kind of common around things like World's Toughest Mudder, the death race, ultras, things like that. And that was initiated from the cramps early on in the race. So that's the rhabdo part. And then the last part I want to mention is kidney failure and liver failure. I don't really want to say much about the liver failure. If Molly, if you want to say something, you can. But the kidney failure was probably from the rhabdo and from the ibuprofen. The ibuprofen, this is where we want to talk about. The ibuprofen is bad because it restricts the blood to your kidneys. Yeah, the restriction of the blood to your kidneys during an endurance event is a pretty terrible thing. And that's where, after doing the research on this, I will never take ibuprofen in an endurance event again. I think it has no place in endurance events. And I think what both Molly and I have come to from the general consensus from the experts now is ibuprofen doesn't belong in endurance events. I believe, Molly, do you want to comment on that with respect to Leadville and some of the other experts you know about?
Yeah, so ibuprofen belongs to a class of medication called nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So NSAIDs, real common over the counter. Along with that is Aleve, so your the little blue ones, and meloxicam, Celebrex. So Jason's a perfect storm. He didn't do any one thing. Everything he did potentiated the other. By using the Advil, he worsened what was already happening. And actually, that's why this has been so interesting for me, because it was like this big ratted ball of yarn, and working with him to untangle it and help him understand what happened. And then to help the general community understand really what Jason and I are both after is preventing this in anybody else. So the Advil decreases the flow to the kidneys. It was already compromised because of low serum sodium, and you've got Advil on top of that, and then further compromised by the muscle breakdown. Jason's creatinine kinase was 150 times normal when he went into the hospital. So it is a measure of how much muscle breakdown you have. There's a certain amount of muscle breakdown expected in this, but that is totally off the charts. So all those things added up. So in the med tent, we will give you 2 Tylenol and we'll mark your bib. And the reason for this is you can definitely get into Tylenol toxicity. You can send yourself right to the hospital taking too much Tylenol as well. We'll mark a little hash mark on your bib. That'll keep you from coming around in 30 minutes and getting 2 more and 2 more and 2 more and 2 more. Max daily dose is 3,000 milligrams, so that would be 3 doses of 2 extra strength Tylenol, 6 tabs.
So as a rule of thumb, is it a good idea to not self-medicate at all while you're out there and just go to the med tent and ask them and they'll keep you in line?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One thing that Jason says is that the sheer availability of so he had Advil on him and in his pack. And then when he'd pit, his pit crew would trade out his pack. It was already preloaded with Advil. So you're 12, 16, however many hours into this, and you're in pain. And that stuff's right there. And that, as I'll tell you, had a big part to do. What I'd really like is for people not to bring it, not to use it, and to educate their pit crew to when they're begging for something in pain, slide them some Tylenol. And if you have any questions, we love to talk in the med tent. We don't have traps. We don't have snares. We don't keep bait. We don't lock people down. The real mission is catch and release. We want to talk to you, and we want to turn you right around and go back out.
So, Jason, what happened in the hospital after that?
Right before I get to that, I do want to say a little bit more on the ibuprofen, like what she was getting at.
Sure.
So, I know better than to take as much ibuprofen as I did. What I mean is that I have tons of self-control. And I could document that throughout my life. But when you're in that much pain, it is a terrible idea to put something so close that it can be impulsive. So I would really advise people not to carry even Tylenol on them. Keep it in your pit if you're going to keep it. And, like she said, either through the med tent or through your crew so that they can help you think through that and make better decisions around medication. Okay, and so moving on to, what you're asking, what happened in the hospital? Well, they admitted me directly to the ICU. I was in the ICU for 4 days where they brought my sodium up. My kidneys weren't working, but they couldn't treat my kidneys until they brought my sodium up to a level that was safe enough for them to treat my kidneys. And then I had to do dialysis, 3 rounds of dialysis. That's where, they filter your blood through a machine. They basically, run a line into your arm, pump your blood out to a machine, clean it, and then pump it back in. They weren't able to return all of my blood during one of the dialysis sessions, and probably caused some anemia, and that lasted about 4 months. Anemia takes a while to recover from. So 4 days in the ICU, lots of different lines sticking out of my arms and my neck. And then once I got out of the ICU, another 3 days just for kind of observation before, letting my numbers come back to reasonable levels before they could release me. They released me from the Vegas hospital. I flew back to Iowa, needed a little bit more dialysis, so they told me, but I ended up not having to get it when I got back to Iowa. Anyway, done with the hospital now. Just had to deal with the, kind of the longer term effects of all this. And one of the ones immediately was anemia. Just, low hematocrit hemoglobin, which, how does that affect you? Well, I couldn't run as fast. I couldn't do what I normally did fitness wise. I'm very active, but I wasn't able to do all of that. But slowly came back. By about March, my numbers were back in the normal range. So we fast forward again another 3 months, June, when I'm ready to really start ramping up to train for World's Toughest Mudder this year. Well, as I brought my workouts up, my running up, I felt terrible. I wasn't recovering, and I'm just sitting back going, what is wrong? And I would tell you, I don't really even know today totally all of what's wrong. I'm still trying to, I'd say, figure that out. I'm talking with Molly and other experts as well, maybe seeing some other specialists. What that translates into is, I can't come back to World's Toughest Mudder this year at, I would call, full strength. If I were to try, I would risk putting myself into similar situations again. One of the major things that is holding me back is cramping still. Like, the cramping is actually worse than in years past. I seem to cramp up more easily, and I don't know why. So, with that happening, I go through a serious, cramping session during the race. And even if I didn't try very hard in the race, I'll be very sore. And, actually I did a race this past weekend, and my calves are still sore today. And that's actually not, compared to my training, that's not normal. Anyway, that kind of brings us up to date with, I think, everything. Molly, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add something in about the cramping. There's a sort of a notion that cramping is secondary to either dehydration and or salt loss. And this research was initially done by Gatorade. Gatorade discovered that they used sort of reverse science, where they had some athletes who, they didn't test their serum sodium, they tested the outside of their skin, and their skin was salty, and they were dehydrated, and they had cramps. And therefore, the cause of the cramps must certainly be loss of fluid and loss of salt. In science, we have to eliminate variables, and you can't make conclusions like that. Now, we all know Gatorade has made quite a bit of money, and this concept is very prevalent, that I'll drink enough water. And I think that's part of what you said. Why would people want to drink so much water? I think we've been sold that I need to drink to prevent cramps, and really it's not true. There is a neuromuscular theory of cramps, which is why your pickle juice can actually, if you take it during an active cramp, it will cut the cramp time in half. That's actually one of the reasons I personally carry salt packs and mustard packs on me. When I was at Toughest Chicago, just there supporting my friends, I had a table out. I had salt and mustard, and I loved it when people would come up, fill their little bag, go out on a lap, and come back for more. Like, yeah, I gave it to somebody. They were cramping, and they're doing better, and they said I helped, and somebody was able to continue. So it's really, like, Jason's biggest, like, the baseline issue is why he gets so many cramps.
Seriously, pickle juice is magic. You can get like a 12-pack on Amazon. It's kind of, I'm not joking, it's like magic. You put it in your mouth and it works almost instantly.
It is published research on pickle juice. It is not a lie.
And pickle juice is kind of expensive to buy it that way, but you can get mustard packs and salt packs for free from any fast food restaurant anywhere.
Right.
I mean, you should probably buy them. You should probably buy a burger or something to justify you taking their mustard, but you know what I
mean. Sure.
When Jason was here, we got gas and got him some coffee, and I demonstrated for him my very best pocket filling of mustard and salt at the local gas station.
So, Molly, what were the biggest mistakes Jason made last year, and how can he prevent them this year?
So he calculated he needed 400 kilocalories per lap to keep up his output.
What is a kilocalorie?
He said, okay, I'm going to get. Oh, it's just a calorie. He said, I'm burning so many calories, and so I need to take in calories. He figured I'll take my calories in with my sports drinks. Sports drinks, none of them, Zilcho, that I know of. I think Tailwind's got some sodium. I haven't figured out how much or whether that's the right amount. The trick is no one can tell you how much sodium is the right amount of sodium. What we can tell you is you can absolutely overdo it. If you are taking in too much salt, your hands will also swell. You will also gain water weight, and you will also feel lousy. So just like water, when you drink to thirst, you have to take salt. When your body says, I want salt, your buddy Eric that was on the program, he said, I just couldn't get enough salt. And that was his body saying, my serum sodium's getting low. Jason, I don't think would have ever been in this situation if he hadn't planned to take in so darn much fluid. The second thing is, we expect a certain amount of muscle breakdown in these events. His was incredibly severe. The Advil didn't help. It certainly worsened things. It certainly potentiated. But if you stack them all on top of each other, that's how you get to the ICU.
What's an example of some good sodium-rich foods people can eat or drink while they're on the course?
Yep. Excellent question. So, everyone's going to love this one, bacon. I mean, bacon, pizza, and chips are like the holy triad of the holy grail, the holy grail of the supplemental fat will help keep you warm. If you're not taking a supplemental fat and you're cold, you're totally missing the boat. The carbohydrates in it will be immediately converted to sugar. That's what your muscles need. They need sugar. They just want easy energy. And the salt's there. Please don't take a bunch of salt tabs, and you're coming in the Med 10 anyway. So eat what you want to eat, drink when you want to drink, and avoid medication, and you're going to be just fine.
One thing I do want to add here is that, one of the things that'll go through people's minds is, well, if I just drink XYZ sports drink, that, this won't happen. No, that's incorrect. You'll just have to drink more than if you just drank water. You can still get into a similar situation with any of the sports drinks, but none of the sports drinks are so salty that their concentration is higher than what's in your blood.
Molly, in the paper, you say signs and symptoms of exercise-associated hyponatremia include swelling of hands and feet, headache, nausea, vomiting, and a change in personality. But you also say these are common in endurance events to some degree. If I have those symptoms, how can I tell if it's serious?
Those are probably going to be your first symptoms. So go ahead and take in some supplemental salt. If your body says, bouillon is great, your cup of noodles is great. Educate your pit crew. So when I was at the NeuroCheck last year, I routinely took people's cold, wet hands in my hands. I was checking for their temperature. I was looking in their eyes, but I was seeing if they were swollen. So if you see that, just consider that like the doorbell ringing. Like, okay, hey, I should probably do something. Now that's not universal. It could be other reasons, but hey, in that situation, go with the supplemental salt. It's dependent edema. It's your hands and feet are what's low. So that's where the balance between the salt level inside the cell and outside the cell is getting off. And so it's spilling. And then when you keep drinking, you continue, that serum sodium level continues to go down. Now, and a really important thing about why Jason is alive is because people knew how to treat him. When most of the cases, many of the cases where people have actually died, they've gone in hyponatremia, and assumptions have been made about why they're in that condition. They've been filled full of fluid, hypotonic saline, normal saline, lactate ringers. That's continued the diffusion process, drops their sodium more, and that's fatal. So my feeling is, you're in an endurance event, you don't let anyone start an IV on you, your friend, or anybody else. In a car accident, you get rolled into the ER, the nurses are going to look at you sideways if those medics didn't start an IV on you. That's fine. But at Tough Mudder, and I've worked with a number of companies, the only one I know of is MedPrep Group, who is contracted by Tough Mudder, will, by policy, draw your chem panel before they'll start that IV on you. And that's crucial. That's the difference maker. If Jason had gone by ambulance or had been somewhere else, I honestly think if he'd been flooded full of fluid, that'd be no Jason.
So to summarize, Jason, the biggest takeaways are drink to thirst, eat salt or sodium-rich foods to thirst, and don't self-medicate while you're out there. Would those be the three biggest lessons to take away?
Yeah, I think so.
Molly, what do you think?
Yes, that's a perfect score right there.
Molly, before we go, can you talk about the relationship Tough Mudder Medical has with the racers out there? Should runners be afraid of medical trying to DQ them or pull them from the course?
I think the most important, there's two really things that jump out at me. Nobody wants to DQ you. We want you to keep going. The policies are, I put stitches in a guy's face and then turned around and sent him back out last year. And nobody thought that was weird. They're like, well, yeah, of course. That's the only company that you're ever going to find something like that with. Most of the time, I have some posts up on the boards about this, people don't treat and release like that. So I think that people are valid if they've been around, they've seen some stuff go wrong, people being disqualified for stupid stuff. Yeah, it's definitely valid. But I just ask that they understand that that Tough Mudder Medical is different. The important thing to remember at Worlds or at Toughest, you have to get yourself to the med tent. You cannot be driven. You can crawl. You can be carried by your friends. I don't care. But if you get driven or if that lifeguard has to extend a floaty to you, those are automatic DQs, and there's nothing to do about that. Get yourself into the med tent. What we're going to do is we're going to talk to you. We're going to get your name. We're going to write down what happened, where it happened. Like in Tahoe, for years, we've been doing stitches in people's knees at electroshock. So when you see 10 incident reports for knee lacerations that happen in electroshock therapy, you can make changes. So you can dig more rocks out of it. Just the terrain there. So that's okay. That doesn't mean we're trying to keep you. There's chocolate in the med tent. There's broth in the med tent. There's pretzels in the med tent. High fat, high salt foods, high sugar foods. So there's heaters in the med tent. Like, we just want to turn you around and keep you going.
So just to clarify the rules, now Tough Mudder hasn't released the official rules for 2017 yet, but in the past, and we anticipate it'll be the same, you can go to the med tent without penalty for up to 30 minutes, but you have to get there by yourself or with the help of other runners or your pit crew. You can't be assisted by a lifeguard on the course, and you cannot be helped from the course by anyone except another runner.
Correct, which is why, I say, look, I'm going to be on the course with you. You're going to know it's me because you're going to pass me about 17 or 18 times, and I'm happy to help you. There's a lot of people that are happy to help you, and those people in red T-shirts, they want to help you also.
Well, Molly, Jason, any last thoughts on Tough Mudder Medical or how to not die? Yeah,
so there was, Molly, you had asked this question, when we were in Chicago together, and that was, what could have been done by Tough Mudder to prevent what happened to me in 2016. And my response was, I don't think they could have done anything, because I think the only thing that would have helped was education, because I passed the neuro checks. I passed every medical person that I ran into at World's Toughest Mudder last year. Sent me on. So I don't know that there is a way for someone like myself, who's coming into this, 2017, to address any of these issues except by education. So listening to this podcast, reading my story somewhere, reading some articles, that's the only way I see to get out ahead of something like this. I know that people like Molly will be looking for, other people like myself at World's Toughest Mudder this coming year. But again, the best way to come out is education. Get the word out there.
Molly, any last thoughts?
My feeling to athletes is, what are you going to do to keep medical from having to do their job? So what gear are you going to bring? What food are you going to eat? What are you going to do? I mean, there's concerns about this neurocheck. If you haven't been, the neurocheck is it's quick. We look at you, we touch you. Do you have your flashlight? Do you have your flasher? We're going to ask you a dumb question like, hey, is your brain still working? We're worried that you're going to go out on the course, wander off the course in a little tiny ball and die. So that's why we're talking to you. That's why we do it. It's not a big deal. I would recommend, so the hypothermia, Jason brought it up for all these other years except last year. Put the money into your gear, put the money into your high-fat foods. If you have concerns about your ability to answer a stupid question, you go to the neurocheck, if it's set up the same way as it last year, after you pit. So you're not coming in at your worst. You're going out at your best. So quiz each other before you get there. If one of your buddies isn't making sense, they're going to get pulled over. If they get pulled over, then we're going to try and give them food. We're going to try and warm them up. We're going to try and do all these things. But do that for each other before it ever comes to that. Keep medical from having to do their job because of the decisions you make. And don't tell me that medical hurt you when you made us do our job.
Molly, Kenneth, Jason Nicholson, thanks much. Special thanks to Molly, Kenneth, and Jason Nicholson for appearing in this episode. Well done, you guys. Don't forget to save the date, November 6th at 9 p.m. Pacific time for a call-in show. Block that time out and make sure to give us a call. I'll give you details as it gets closer. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, leave us a review on iTunes. I would sincerely appreciate it. Hey, stay tuned. We've got a bunch of extra episodes coming up in the next 2 weeks leading up to World's Toughest Mudder. Thanks a lot, you guys.